New Orleans, a city where jazz notes curl like cigarette smoke over Bourbon Street, where Mardi Gras beads glitter in the gutters, and where ghosts are said to outnumber the living. But between 1991 and 1995, a different kind of specter stalked these streets, one made of flesh and bone. In the historic Storyville district, 26 women disappeared, not into the fog, not into legend, into dumpsters behind neon-lit bars, into crawl spaces beneath abandoned Creole townhouses, into pine coffins so cheap, the wood split before the dirt could settle. Each was raped, each was strangled, each was left as a warning to the next. But unlike the tales of voodoo queens and pirate curses that tourists devour, this story went untold. The killer had a nickname, the Storyville Slayer, but no face. No motive, no spotlight, because the media didn't see a monster. They saw a statistic, and statistics don't sell papers. This is the story of how a city's silence became a killer's weapon. Not the kind that lurks in swamps or hides under beds, but one made of brick and rot and human hunger. That beast was Storyville. In 1897, New Orleans politicians carved out 38 blocks and named it a moral quarantine, a legal red light district where vice wasn't just tolerated, it was taxed. Brothels boomed with silk-draped madams and jazz pioneers like Jelly Roll Morton, who played piano for men waiting their turn upstairs. But in 1917, the government boarded it all up, pretending to erase the sin. They didn't. They just handed it a new name, neglect. By the 1990s, Storyville wasn't a district, it was a wound. Crumbling Greek revival facades sagged like tired faces. Streetlights buzzed and died, leaving corners so dark they felt alive. And in those shadows lived women the world had cursed twice over. Sex workers shunned by the daylight, addicts chasing dragons in alleyways, runaways with bruises hidden under thrift store sweaters. Cops, they patrolled like ghosts, passing through but never staying. Reporters, they'd scribble a paragraph on page 6 if a tourist got pickpocketed. But not a word for the woman found naked in a storm drain. The Slayer didn't choose Storyville by accident. He chose it because it was already a graveyard. No one looked twice at a man trolling those streets at 2 a.m. No one wondered why he lingered near the old gentleman's club sign. Its letters rusted down to NT Man CLU. To him, these women weren't people. They were whispers. And whispers don't scream loud enough to wake the city. Serial killers love patterns. Zodiac's ciphers. BTK's taunting letters. But the Storyville Slayer's pattern wasn't in how he killed. It was in how he hid. Let's start with the first thread pulled from the darkness. March 17th, 1991, St. Patrick's Day. While tourists drowned in green beer, 24-year-old Marlene DuPont took her last breath behind the ruins of the Blue Note Jazz Club. Her body was curled like a question mark, a braided nylon cord still knotted around her neck. Marlene had dreams once of being a nurse, of adopting a greyhound, of leaving the French Quarter behind. But to detectives, she was just another crime of passion, case closed by sunrise. Then, 14 months later, Angela Teague, 31 years old, a mother who'd lost custody of her son and worked the streets to pay for a lawyer's retainer. Same cord, same ligature marks, same shrug from a detective who told reporters. These girls, they make enemies. By 1993, the bodies piled up like unpaid bills. Linda Morales, a transgender woman who fled Texas after her family disowned her. Darla Johnson, a 19-year-old runaway last seen buying aspirin for a migraine. All strangled, all posed eastward, all ignored. The Slayer didn't outsmart the system. He weaponized it. Reporters called the victims high risk, a cold term that really meant unworthy of ink. Cops joked about natural selection over stale coffee. And while the city partied, the killer danced to a rhythm only he could hear. 1 death, 2 deaths, 26, a symphony of silence. Every serial killer leaves a fingerprint, not on their victims, but on their crimes. And the Storyville Slayer's fingerprint was a grotesque work of art. Let's break it down. First, the chloroform, not the clinical kind from hospitals, but a homemade brew. Cotton rags soaked in chemicals stolen from a high school chemistry lab, acetone and ice. Mixed in a motel sink, he'd strike from behind, pressing the rag over mouths mid-sentence. No struggle, no screams, just silence. Then came the cord, braided nylon. The kind sold at hardware stores for tying down tarps. Cheap, disposable, unremarkable. He'd loop it twice around their throats, always clockwise, and pull until the veins in his arms burned. But his true signature came after they were dead. He'd arranged their bodies facing east, toward the Mississippi River, not toward the sunrise, not toward Mecca, toward the water, the same river that carried slave ships and jazz funeral barges. Detectives called it spiritual arrogance, a serial killer's delusion of godhood. But here's the truth. His greatest weapon wasn't the cord or the chloroform. It was the year on the calendar, 1993. No national DNA database. No security cameras peering from every corner. Just a police lab drowning in backlogged rape kits and overworked techs who missed the minuscule skin cells trapped under Marlene DuPont's fingernails. The Slayer didn't hide his signature. He hid it in plain sight, knowing nobody would look. In 1994, the Storyville Slayer made his first mistake. His name wasn't Dana, but hers was. She was the one who looked him in the eye, the one who fought back, the one who survived. And because of her, we know this monster had a face, a voice, a rusted blue pickup truck. But Dana's story isn't about a hero. It's about what happens when the truth falls on deaf ears, and how a killer turned doubt into his deadliest weapon. Let's call her Dana, not her real name. Of course, even now, 30 years later, she lives in the shadows, not out of fear, but because the world never really saw her to begin with. Dana was 28 years old in 1994, a recovering addict. 6 months clean. She'd grown up in Baton Rouge, loved sketching birds in the margins of library books, and had a laugh that sounded like a wind chime in a storm. But in the eyes of New Orleans, she was just another street girl, a face to ignore, until the night she became the face that haunted the Storyville Slayer. It happened on October 12th, near the corner of Bienville and Marais. Dana was walking home from a late shift at a diner, her sneakers splashing through rain puddles. A rusted blue pickup slowed beside her. The driver rolled down his window. "Need a ride?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost gentle, polite. Dana hesitated, but the rain was cold, and the man seemed normal. She climbed in. Minutes later, he parked behind an old laundromat, its windows boarded shut. Dana remembers the smell first, chemicals, sharp and sweet, like nail polish remover. Then the rag clamped over her mouth. She'd seen enough TV to know what chloroform smelled like. But this was different, harsher, homemade. Dana's body went limp, but her mind stayed awake. She felt the truck lurch forward, felt his hands tugging her into the back seat. And then she fought. Later, detectives would call it a miracle. Dana was petite, 5'2", 100 pounds, but desperation turned her fists into weapons. She clawed at his eyes, bit his wrist until blood bloomed under her teeth. When he recoiled, she kicked open the passenger door and ran, her legs numb, her lungs burning. She didn't stop until she collapsed at a gas station, her shirt torn, her throat raw from screaming. The clerk called 911, and for the first time in 3 years, the Storyville Slayer left behind something more than a body, a witness. Dana gave detectives everything. A description, white male, late 30s, thin lips, a chipped front tooth, driving a rusted blue pickup with a Support Our Troops bumper sticker. She remembered the license plate started with LZ. She even recalled the radio was playing Sweet Home Alabama when he attacked. It was the break the case needed. But when detectives ran her name through the system, they didn't see a survivor. They saw a crack pipe in her past, a shoplifting charge from 1992, a woman who'd made bad choices. One detective later admitted, "Off the record, we figured she was hustling for attention or trying to score pills." They took her statement, then filed it under unfounded. No APB for the truck, no sketches circulated to the media, just Dana, sitting in a cold interrogation room, begging someone to believe her. Meanwhile, the Storyville Slayer wasn't hiding. He was learning, adapting. 3 weeks after Dana's escape, he struck again this time, 3 blocks from the police precinct. His victim, 22-year-old Alicia Torres, was found in a dumpster behind a Thai restaurant, strangled with the same braided cord, posed facing east. The killer wasn't just taunting the cops. He was proving a point. Dana's courage meant nothing, not in a world that refused to see her as human. Today, Dana's testimony is a ghost in the case files. The LZ license plate? It belonged to a truck reported stolen in Metairie. A lead never followed. The chipped tooth? Dental records could have matched it to suspects, but the file gathered dust. And the Support Our Troops bumper sticker? A detail so specific, it could have ended the killing spree. Instead, It became just another dead end in a maze of apathy. The Slayer vanished after 1995. Dana, she's still here, still fighting, not for herself, but for the 26 women whose voices were silenced. They treated me like I was nothing, she told a reporter in 2003. But I was the only one who looked that bastard in the eye. And I'm still looking. The bodies stopped appearing, no more women found posed by the river. No more braided cords left twisted around throats. The killings ended as suddenly as a slammed door. But silence isn't justice. It's just quiet. And in that quiet, theories festered like rot. Was the Slayer dead? Had he overdosed in some flop house? His corpse fed to gators in the bayou? Or was he sitting in a prison cell for a lesser crime, burglary, assault, unaware that detectives were one fingerprint away from linking him to 26 murders? Maybe he simply got bored, packed his truck and drove west, chasing new hunting grounds where women were just as invisible, just as forgotten. We'll never know, because the only thing sharper than the Slayer's knife was the world's indifference. Today, his identity is a black hole. No DNA matches, no deathbed confessions, just whispers. Was he a long-haul trucker using I-10 to stalk the South? A dock worker who smelled of fish guts and bleach? A church deacon with blood under his fingernails? The truth is buried deeper than his victims. Only 14 of the 26 women have been officially connected to him. The rest, Jane Does in Potter's Fields, paupers' graves marked by numbers, not names. Let's break that down. 14 women remembered, 12 erased twice, first by the killer, then by history. Take Jane Doe number 3, found in 1992 behind a shuttered pharmacy. She wore a silver locket with a photo of a toddler inside. No one ever claimed her. Or Jane Doe number 8, a black teenager dumped in a sugarcane field, her braces still glinting in the mud. She'd written, "I miss you," Mom in a notebook found miles away. These women weren't ghosts. They were real. They bled. They loved. They mattered. But without a name, a case file goes cold. And cold cases don't get documentaries, FBI task forces, or glossy true crime podcasts. They get shrugs. Meanwhile, the families left behind scream into a void. Maria Gonzalez's sister, Lola, vanished in 1993. For years, Lola's mother called the precinct every Friday, begging for updates. The detective's answer never changed. "We're doing all we can." But all they could was nothing. When Lola's mother died in 2012, her last words were, "Find her." They never did. Then there's Raymond Carter, whose daughter, Tamika, left for a convenience store in 1994 and never came home. Raymond spent his life savings on flyers, private investigators, psychics. He died homeless under a bridge in 2015, still clutching Tamika's middle school photo. And what of the cops who failed them? Most retired with pensions. One became a security guard. Another wrote a memoir about the big cases. No mention of Storyville. The only officer who cared, a detective named Frank Mullins, spent his nights after retirement combing through old witness statements. He found Dana's buried testimony in 2001, the LZ license plate, the chipped tooth, the Sweet Home Alabama radio detail. He begged the department to reopen the case. They said there was no budget. Frank died of a heart attack 2 years later. Mid-sentence, while arguing with a prosecutor about evidence storage. In 2017, a rookie cop stumbled onto a box of files labeled Storyville, inactive. Inside were Polaroids of the victims, their eyes still open, the braided cords, preserved in plastic bags. Dana's handwritten statement, coffee-stained and folded into thirds. The rookie took it to his captain. Hopeful. The captain sighed. That's ancient history. Focus on the murders people actually care about. So here we are. The Storyville Slayer isn't a legend. He's a stain, a reminder that evil doesn't always lose. Sometimes, it just stops. And the rest of us? We become accomplices by omission. We let the world forget because remembering is hard, because it means admitting that we value some lives more than others. That a waitress, a sex worker, a runaway can vanish, and the earth doesn't even shudder. But listen closely. In New Orleans, there's a saying, the dead don't speak. They hum. Walk through Storyville today, past the new condos and artisan coffee shops, and you might feel it, a low, steady vibration under your feet. It's not the jazz bands on Bourbon Street. It's not the rumble of streetcars. It's 26 voices, humming a truth we've tried to bury. They're waiting for someone to stop, to listen, to say their names. This isn't a true crime story. It's a reckoning. a flashlight aimed at the rot we ignore. Let's start with a name, Linda Morales. She loved pineapple soda, hated the smell of rain, and wanted to be a hairdresser. But when her body was found in 1993, the newspaper called her a man in women's clothing. No obituary, no candlelight vigil, just a footnote in a killer's spree. Linda wasn't high risk. She was human, and her death, like the 25 others, exposes a lie we've all been fed, that some lives are worth less than others. Think about it. When a college student vanishes, it's a national emergency. Helicopters, Amber Alerts, tears on the evening news. But when a sex worker disappears, silence. The Storyville Slayer didn't prey on women. He preyed on invisible women, because he knew the world wouldn't miss them. Their deaths weren't tragedies, they were inconveniences. And that's not a flaw in the system. It's the system working exactly as designed. Let's talk about the high-risk label. Cop code for less dead. These women weren't reckless. They were trapped. Trapped by addiction, by poverty, by abuse. Trapped in a city that sold postcards of Bourbon Street, but turned its back on the people who cleaned its hotel rooms and served its cocktails. The Slayer didn't choose them because they were easy targets. He chose them because they were allowed to be targets, because we made them disposable. Here's what indifference looks like. In 1994, a charity tried to install streetlights in Storyville. The city blocked it, calling it a waste of resources. In 2023, that same city spent $2 million renovating a jazz museum 3 blocks from where Alicia Torres's body was found. Priorities. The Slayer's ghost isn't in the shadows. It's in the budgets we pass, the laws we don't, the stories we click on, and the ones we scroll past. But this isn't just about New Orleans. It's about the indigenous women vanishing from Highway 16 in Canada, the black trans women murdered in Atlanta, the addicts buried in Potter's Fields from London to Mumbai. The Storyville Slayer isn't one man. He's a blueprint that works as long as we believe some people are born to be forgotten. So why does this story matter? Because Dana still matters. Because Linda's family in Texas still waits for answers. Because Jane Doe number 8's mother died without knowing where her daughter was buried. Because every time we call a victim high risk, we hand the next killer his hunting license. Monsters don't thrive in the dark. They thrive in the light of our excuses. You want to honor these women? Start by saying their names. All 26 of them. Not as victims. Not as statistics. As people. Marlene DuPont, who loved greyhounds. Angela Teague, who fought for custody of her son. Linda Morales, who hated the rain. Darla Johnson, who bought aspirin for a migraine. Alicia Torres, who loved spicy Thai food. Jane Doe number 3, who kept a toddler's photo in her locket. Jane Doe number 8, who missed her mom. Keep saying them until the world can't pretend it doesn't hear. The Storyville Slayer didn't win. Not yet, because stories like this don't end when the killing stops. They end when we stop looking away. When we stop letting high risk mean no risk at all. When we stop letting monsters hide in plain sight, not under beds, but in courtrooms, newsrooms, and precincts where case files gather dust. New Orleans built its fame on jazz funerals, on turning grief into music. But these 26 women never got a parade. No trumpets, no second lines, just the hum of a city rushing to forget. So here's your choice. Let this story fade like their graves in Potter's Field. Or carry it with you. Let it simmer in your throat every time someone says high risk. Let it remind you that the dead aren't gone. They're waiting, and they're tired of being ignored. New Orleans is a city built on stories. They're etched into its cobblestones, whispered through its oak trees, sold for $15 a pop on ghost tours. Stories about pirates and voodoo queens, about Louis Armstrong's first trumpet and the brothels where jazz was born. But there's one story this city doesn't tell, one it tried to bury under neon and nostalgia, because this story isn't about legends. It's about 26 women whose lives ended in alleys, whose names faded from headlines, and whose voices still claw at the edges of this town's conscience. Walk down Bienville Street today, and you'll see art galleries selling Mardi Gras masks, cafes brewing $8 lattes, condos where the Blue Note Jazz Club once stood. But if you pause just for a second beneath the clatter of dishes and the yammer of TikTok influencers, you'll hear it, the faintest echo, a gasp, a whimper, a plea. It's not the wind, it's not your imagination, it's them. Marlene DuPont, who dreamed of nursing sick animals back to health. Angela Teague, who kept a photo of her son taped inside her shoe. Linda Morales, who wrote letters to a sister she hadn't seen in a decade. They're here, not as ghosts, as reminders. Reminders that high risk is just a lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. That unsolved doesn't mean unimportant. That a city's soul isn't measured by its parades, but by how it treats the people swept aside when the music stops. The Storyville Slayer didn't just steal lives. He exposed a rot we're still too proud to name. A rot that says some voices deserve to be heard and others deserve to disappear. But here's the truth. Disappearing takes work. It takes cops ignoring witnesses, lawmakers slashing funds for streetlights, reporters chasing clicks instead of clues. It takes all of us, every time we look away, every time we call a victim nobody, every time we let a killer's name fade, because remembering is uncomfortable. So let's be uncomfortable. Let's say their names until they're louder than the jazz and the jeers. Let's dig up the case files gathering mold in storage rooms. Let's ask why Jane Doe number 3's locket still sits in an evidence locker. Or why Dana's testimony was stamped unreliable, because she once fought demons the world refused to see. Let's stop pretending justice has an expiration date. The Storyville Slayer may never face a jury, but we can still deliver a verdict. One that says these women mattered, that their lives weren't footnotes in a true crime trivia game, that their deaths weren't inevitable, they were invitations. Invitations to do better, to be better, to stop letting monsters write history. New Orleans will keep selling its stories. But this one, it's not for sale. It's a debt, a promise, a scream trapped in the throat of every silent bystander who let 26 graves go unmourned. So the next time you hear laughter on Bourbon Street, or a trumpet's wail, or the river's endless sigh, listen closer. Somewhere in that noise, 26 voices are still waiting for the only thing they ever wanted, to be heard.